Well, could Iran be walking on thin ice? Are there fears its security system could be vulnerable? And as those questions linger in your minds, we begin the program with what might be a big stepping stone in the Middle East crisis. A missile strike was launched inside Iran, a claim made by two U.S. officials who believe the attack was carried out by Israel. Israel has not officially commented on this or acknowledged it carried out any attack. But it seems Iran is not expending so much energy on this strike. As the Iranian state-owned news network Press TV reported, there was no sign of explosion or damage at a nuclear site near the city of Isfahan. Its state's media, on the other hand, says the country's air defense systems were activated and 3 aerial objects thought to be quadcopters were destroyed over the central city of Isfahan. Iran's semi-official news agency reports that the city is completely calm and secure. We're looking at pictures of the city. Officials say it's back to normal now and residents are going about their daily activities after the reported explosions earlier today. A senior Iranian official has said that there's no plan for immediate retaliation, adding that there was no clarity yet on who was behind the incident. The strike comes 6 days after Iran's unprecedented attack on Israel territory last weekend. Meanwhile, the International Atomic Energy Agency says it can confirm there was no damage to Iran's nuclear sites. Isfahan is home to a large airbase, a major missile production complex, and several nuclear facilities. IAEA Chief Rafael Grossi is calling for extreme restraint from everyone involved, and while reiterating that nuclear facilities should never be a target in military conflicts. Syria, on the other hand, says missile strikes have caused material damage to air defense sites in the country's southern region without specifying the exact location or the extent of the damage, which it blames on Israel. In the meantime, Iran has lifted flight restrictions across the country, paving the way for the resumption of regular flights in all its airports. Earlier, Iran closed its airports in Tehran, Shiraz, and Isfahan after the reported explosions and cleared flights from the western portion of its airspace for a few hours. While flights are back to normal at Tehran's main domestic airport, officials also note that the central city of Isfahan is completely calm and secure hours after explosions near the airport. As expected, world leaders have been reacting to the attack as regional tensions rise between Israel and Iran. The president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, is calling on Iran, Israel, and their allies to avoid further escalation in the Middle East. Oman, which has been acting as a mediator in an attempt to de-escalate the situation, also condemned the purported Israeli attack on Iran. France is also calling for de-escalation in the region, with Deputy Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot saying France's position is to call for calm and restraint. Meanwhile, Egypt's foreign ministry has issued a statement expressing deep concern about the escalation between Iran and Israel. The statement called on both parties to exercise the utmost levels of restraint, warning of the consequences of expanding the conflict and instability in the region. China, Germany, Jordan, and Russia have also urged restraint. For the British Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, significant escalation is not in anyone's interest in the Middle East. He says work is underway to confirm the details together with allies. Japan, on the other hand, strongly condemned the action, saying it will continue to make all necessary diplomatic efforts to prevent the situation from worsening further. Well, G7 leaders are discussing the overnight explosions in Iran on the 3rd day of their 3-day meeting in Italy. The foreign ministers urged all parties to work to prevent further escalation in the Middle East. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken refused to comment on the reported Israeli attack against Iran, only saying that the U.S. has not been involved in any offensive operation. He adds that the G7's focus is on de-escalation. He also noted that Israel makes its own decisions, but the United States is committed to its security. Italian Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani says he has spoken with the country's ambassador to Iran and is following developments. Mr. Tajani added that there are currently no critical issues for Italian citizens living in Iran, adding that the G7 wants an absolute de-escalation. Canada's Foreign Minister, Melanie Joly, who is also at the meeting, said her team is monitoring the situation closely. G7 leaders previously agreed to step up cooperation in managing growing tensions in the Middle East. And the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres says the Middle East is hanging on a cliff, warning any bad actions could lead to a full-scale regional conflict. Mr. Guterres was addressing members of the Security Council at the headquarters in New York. The UN chief called for peace to reign in the besieged region and beyond.
The Middle East is on a precipice. Recent days have seen a perilous escalation in words and deeds. One miscalculation, one miscommunication, one mistake could lead to the unthinkable, a full-scale regional conflict that would be devastating for all involved and for the rest of the world. The risks are spiraling on many fronts. We have a shared responsibility to address those risks and pull the region back from the precipice. The Middle East is on a knife edge. Recent escalations make it even more important to support good faith efforts to find lasting peace between Israel and a fully independent, viable and sovereign Palestinian state. Failure to make progress towards a two-state solution will only increase volatility and risk for hundreds of millions of people across the region who will continue to live under the constant threat of violence. I urge every government involved to use its influence and leverage to promote trust building, mutual security and regional peace. We have a shared moral obligation to advance a comprehensive Middle East de-escalation effort in order to reduce risks, increase stability, and pave the way towards peace and prosperity for the countries and people of the region and beyond.
Well, it was only yesterday the European Union agreed to expand sanctions on Iranian producers of drones and missiles following Tehran's unprecedented attack on Israel. Speaking to reporters in the Belgium capital, Brussels, European Council President Charles Michel says that the bloc is keen on doing everything it can to protect civilians as their lives matter. He reiterated the need for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and the need for a two-state solution. He also called for the unconditional release of all remaining hostages in Gaza.
The Middle East, we had an in-depth debate one more time. We agreed on a common position. And what are the main points? First, we condemn this attack launched by Iran against Israel. We have decided to put in place sanctions against Iran. This is a clear signal that we want to send. And we also want to do everything to protect the civilians. Each civilian life matters. We call on the release without any conditions of all hostages. We call on a ceasefire, an immediate ceasefire, and we want the humanitarian access for the people in need in Gaza. And we support the two-state solution. We had a good debate, and we feel it's very important to do everything to isolate Iran, to engage with the countries in the region so that we can try to support a peace process, to support peace talks. We support the security of Israel, there is no doubt, and we are absolutely convinced that this is extremely important to engage a lot with the countries in the region to avoid more escalation, more regional escalation, and this is already the case, and we need to stop this regional escalation. And this kind of debate, we have the conclusions on the one hand, but there is also what I'm calling the collective intelligence, and the fact we can think together and we can try to identify what is the best tools we can use, on the one hand, to support Israel, people of Israel and their security, and the right for Israel to exist, point one. On the other hand, to make sure that we avoid avoid any further regional escalation. We have to do debate on that, and we think that we need to be very active at the diplomatic level and to engage a lot with the countries in the region, because the countries in the region, they know that Iran is a threat, not only for Israel, it's a threat for the stability in that region. And it's very clear when we have seen that Iran has decided to launch this attack a few days ago against Israel. That's why this engagement with the countries in the region is fundamental, and we need to isolate Iran. We put in place sanctions against Iran, and we work closely with our partners. And it's very consistent with the meeting we had a few days ago. It was on Sunday, the G7 virtual meeting, and this European Council is very consistent with what we have decided to express a few days ago together with our G7 partners. I can tell you that the G7 statement, point one, but also the European Council statement today, we call on all the parties to exercise the utmost restraint.
Let's expand this discussion. Joining us now is Stephen Hayes, President Emeritus, Corporate Council on Africa, and former President, American Center on International Leadership. Glad to have you today.
Well, thank you. It's good to see you again.
Right. So, of course, we have to begin with this latest development. Two United States officials say that Israeli missile hit Iran. Iran's response to this strike has been muted and mild, with some officials even denying outright that it even took place at all. Some also saying that no damage has been done. Do you think Iran is downplaying this attack?
Yes, I do. I think that they also are saying that it was from inside Iran, which does make a very subtle diplomatic difference, because they can say it was not launched from Israel, even though they may feel that it was Israel's doing, which it probably was. So I think they are downplaying. I think based on conversations I've had, I think that they're ready to move on. They will have some public pressure to do something, but certainly that pressure is not like it was initially. So I think that, and I'm hopeful, I should say, rather than I think, I'm hopeful that this ends this particular tit for tat.
Regardless of the extent of the damage or not, the suspected Israeli strike sends a message to Iran about the vulnerability of its security, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, it certainly does. It says that you're vulnerable in the same way that Iran sent a massive missile and drone attack, saying that you're vulnerable, even though the defense system was amazingly good. It may not be so much the next time. So I think what both countries got out of this was that we have some work to do in terms of our defenses, and maybe we ought to slow this down. At least I hope that that's what both got out. I certainly know that they are looking at their defense systems. They're certainly looking at their attack systems too now, particularly Iran, since 99% of their drones and missiles didn't get through. So I think that a reevaluation is happening all over the Middle East, and I hope that's the case.
And being mute doesn't necessarily mean that, there's no action that's going to take place. Do you see this prompting another act of aggression in the near future, forcing Iran to strike back, maybe harder this time?
I think there's almost a permanent set of aggressive acts on both sides, or all sides, I should say, since there's so many different sides in the Middle East. I think it's just a state of existence now. Those acts, though, will not necessarily be overt. They'll continue to be what has happened over the years, is behind the scenes, undercover, and going at one another in that way, and less overt, in order to tone down the setting of war.
And Israel has been threatening to respond to Iran's attack of about 300-odd drones and missiles on Israel earlier this week. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has decided he wants Israel to have the last word on this. Do you think Israel is being strategic about this situation?
I do. I think that was the last word, unless Iran does something very overt back, which is what everyone is worried about. I think that was their last word. I think that there was a strong pressure from the U.S. and others on Israel to stop this as soon as possible. So I think the next problem is going to be what do we do on Rafah and coming to grips with the humanitarian crises in Israel.
And the international, beg your pardon, the international community has condemned the tensions. We've, read up on what everybody has been saying, world leaders, the tensions between Israel and Iran, warning there should be no escalation. The United Nations has also condemned the action. I mean, no one wants an all-out conflict. Israel clearly is still at war with Hamas. But many wonder what really can be done to put an end to all of this crisis in the Middle East.
Well, I think first of all, that's a central question, of course. I think that it's really coming down to, can Hamas accept the terms of a ceasefire? I think that I understand why they don't want to. I think it's in even their interest to accept a ceasefire. They clearly don't think so. I think you need a temporary ceasefire to at least address the humanitarian crises. I think it would also give time for other views and other factors to come into play. But if Israel attacks Rafah, then there's absolutely no way, I think, to stop this from going to a violent conclusion.
Right, and in a game of boxing or wrestling, the players trying to psych each other out. Do you imagine this could be the situation, or do you believe that the players in this will really be at each other's throat if it really comes to that?
Well, I think there's always a chess game going on internationally, in particular between warring sides. A lot of a war is based on PR, based on getting public opinion behind you and so forth. So there's always that. I don't think that Prime Minister Netanyahu's particular government is ready for peace. I don't think Hamas is either. They've got to come to some reasonable conclusion, if there is any reasonable conclusion, and come to an agreement at the very least for a ceasefire that lasts for several weeks at least, which gives everyone a time to sit down at the table, work out what might be possible. But you can't work it out when you're killing one another.
Yes, certainly. Thank you for your time, Stephen. Pleasure having you on the program today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. An honor, as usual.